Good evening, Bahamas, coming up tonight in our news.
The Environment Minister gives an update on the New Providence landfill.
Plus, a Fit Friday showdown you won't want to miss.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Jared Higgs. Topping news tonight, the controversial relocation of the General Post Office to the Town Centre Mall has been delayed, according to Transport and Local Government Minister Renward Wells, who told reporters today that the move will no longer be happening in time for the holidays. Jasmine Brown reports.
Transport and Local Government Minister made the comments on the sidelines of a tourism meeting as he admitted that new deadline is unavoidable. The Transport Minister said while he had initially promised the move would take place in time for Christmas, it had to be slightly delayed as a result of changes to renovation plans.
I know we had put the deadline for the entire move, but given the desires and the needs of what the post office requires in order to function properly, we've had to relook at the design for the post office. So now our timeline is more the 1st of January for the move to take place. And it's important that we get that done because at the end of the day, the Bahamas is going to be reviewed by the International Postal Organization, who audits every country in regards to its postal operation. And the last time they were here, the Bahamas didn't fare very well.
Wells said there was also an issue with existing post office boxes that were supposed to be moved to the new location.
We've had to look at, it was our intention to just simply look at moving the boxes, the existing boxes, from the post office down to the Town Centre Mall. But in looking at that, we realized that that was not going to be possible. So we're actually buying, well, the government isn't, but the actual owner of the post office is buying the post office boxes, and we're looking at increasing the amount of post office boxes at the Town Centre Mall by some 10%.
In October, Wells tabled a controversial resolution in Parliament seeking approval for the government to enter into a 5-year lease with the owners of Town Centre Mall, who include Minister of Financial Services and Immigration Brent Simonet, to house the General Post Office. The move was slammed by not only the opposition but also some F&M members of Parliament, who all voted against the resolution after telling the House they could not support the decision, which they contended places Simonet in a clear conflict of interest. The government intends to lease 75,000 square feet of space for the concessionary rate of $12 per square foot, or $900,000 a year. The landlords will bear the $3.5 million cost of renovations in the building. When asked if the delayed move has thrown the government's budget for the project off, Wells said no. In the meantime, postal workers are still operating at the post office on East Hill Street.
Staff is still on half days, and rightfully so. I mean, we can't expect, like I said to you all during the debate, we can't expect for folks to work in the kind of environment that I have seen.
Reporting for our news, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Nearly 4 months after a firm was chosen to manage the New Providence landfill, a contract has yet to be signed. Gillian Gray tells us why.
While the Environment Minister failed to say when the contractual agreement with the new managers of the landfill will be signed, he said he's certain that that company will address some long-standing issues.
It's largely complete. Obviously, the language has to be one that both sides agree with. I am not a lawyer involved in the process, but as soon as the lawyers have the language that they can agree on, we'll make the announcement and we'll execute the document.
Government issued Providence advisors a letter of award in August. Back then, Ferreira said he expected negotiations to be completed in 30 days. However, more than 3 months later, those talks continue to drag on.
Now, the selected bidder and the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Environment and Housing are engaged in negotiations as to how the contractual arrangement will look. That will govern the relationship between the parties, and that's what's going on now. As soon as that's complete, we'll have a signing ceremony and we'll disclose that.
Residents of neighboring communities have long complained about the smell and fires at the New Providence landfill. It all came to a head last year when residents were pushed out of their homes from thick black smoke emanating from a massive fire that covered 90% of the dump.
Most importantly, members of the public, communities that surround the New Providence sanitary landfill, the schools, can see a marked difference in the management of the landfill with less impact on their daily lives.
Providence Advisors Waste Resources Development Group was selected following a request for proposal. The previous company, Renew Bahamas, withdrew its services amid disagreements with the former government. While some environmentalists have slammed the Minnis administration for a lack of transparency during this latest RFP process, the Environment Minister maintains that once the contract is signed, they will reveal the details.
I mean, obviously, there will be items in there that are of a commercially sensitive nature and that everyone won't be privy to. That's typical in contractual arrangements, but as soon as that becomes available, we'll make it known.
As the government pushes ahead with its plans to ban plastic waste, Ferreira said proper remediation techniques at the landfill will work in tandem with that move, adding that remediation procedures at the New Providence landfill will act as a template for other islands. Reporting for R News, I'm Jillian Gray.
Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis promising his administration will introduce campaign finance reform legislation before the end of this term in office. While he did not give a firm deadline, he indicated it is still on the government's agenda.
I promised Charles. You also promised me 5 years. My 5 years ain't up yet. And you're going to promise me another 5 years.
In 1980, the Pinling administration drafted a bill to govern money in politics. The bill, which was never tabled in Parliament, would have allowed for the appointment of a registrar of political parties. It is not clear why that bill was shelved. 38 years later, Dr. Minnis promised that his government would amend the Public Disclosure Act to broaden the scope of application to include campaign finance reform and to make provision for direct referral to an independent prosecutor. Today, Minnis insisted he has more than enough time to keep his promise.
I have 5 years to put in the campaign finance reform, and I have another 5 years for you to see it working properly.
The Ministry of Works and Water and Sewerage Corporation recently began lengthy roadworks in the West Bay Street area. Officials say they anticipate some bumps along the way, including road closures. Vonique Toot reports.
West Bay Street residents can expect single and full road closures over the next 6 months as the Ministry of Works and Water and Sewerage Corporation begin extensive road works in the area.
It encompasses Tropical Gardens, Blake Road, a number of the western subdivisions like Yuma Estates, Indigo, Saffron Hills, Bahamia West, and several others.
The West Bay Street Road Rehabilitation Project began on November 29th and is expected to be completed by May 29th, 2019. Road rehabilitation works will be conducted on West Bay Street from the Blake Road Junction to Tropical Gardens.
What we're doing is basically replacing the existing asphalt surface, which is now worn, and in some cases has failed and needs to be replaced, and it doesn't provide good rideability for the driving public. So we're going to now remove that and replace it with a smooth surface that persons would have pleasure riding on. But before we do that, and to avoid having to excavate or trench after the works has been completed, we're going to do the utility works in advance, which is the waterworks.
Engineer for Bill Simmons Construction Kevin Sweeting and project officer in the Ministry of Works Megan Wilson say the project will be carried out in 2 phases.
The first phase of the project is water and sewage lateral replacements. The second phase of the project would be milling and paving of the existing roadway. So the first phase of the project should last from Thursday of this week up until February 2019, and then the second phase will go from February 2019 to May 2019.
Wilson warned the major project would result in road closures between 9:30 a.m. and 4 p.m., as well as 7 p.m. and 6 a.m.
There will be a combination of single lane closures as well as full lane closures. And when those full lane closures take place, there will be specified detour routes on the roadway.
However, Simmons says roadworks will be halted during the holiday season.
We're coming into the Christmas and the New Year season. Our plan is to stop works on the 15th of December, and then we will again resume works on the 7th of January. And during that period, there will be no works because we know a lot of persons are moving around.
After paving is completed, works officials Officials plan to install raised pavement markers and reflective signage to improve driving conditions. Officials recently held an open house and embarked on a door-to-door campaign to educate residents and business owners in the area on the scope of works and how they could be impacted.
Because it's a lengthy project, 6 months, and so we anticipate that, there may be some bumps in the road.
Reporting for our News, I'm Vonique Tu.
Reduced murder and armed robbery rates have done away with the fear of crime, according to Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis, who touted the lower crime figures in an interview with reporters on Thursday. However, does the public agree? We hit the streets to find out.
When you talk to the average Bahamian, yesteryear, there was great fear of crime. They were fearful of coming out of their homes, fearful of driving around, etc. That fear has been relaxed. They're no longer fearful of crime.
The murder count currently stands at 83. This time last year, it was at 117. While the Prime Minister pointed to lower murder and armed robbery rates as contributing to a reduced fear of crime, most members of the public polled by Our News took a widely different view from Minnis.
Who don't fear crime? I scared? You were scared? He must be scared. He bold. He got security. I ain't got no security.
Yeah, I still fear crime. Every day my mother, when I'm headed home, she still calls me, hey, you on your way? Because it's still a fear out there. The crime rate might have gone down, but it's still a fear.
The week was marred with 2 double murders just 36 hours apart. It also brought news that armed robberies were down 14%. Earlier in the week, police offered holiday crime tips, ultimately warning members of the public to be extra cautious during the festive season.
Everybody should have a fear of crime this kind of time of the year, especially this kind of time of the year. Things that does happen, you got to be watching the back of the nose.
Do you feel comfortable moving about, going out?
I mean, in the day, yeah, like that, but then you see nighttime come, that's a different show. Inside or stay close home.
I don't know how far they think they get crime put down, but I'm like, the scandal, now people losing their job and stuff like that, and people get to, they're doing other things just to make ends meet, and some losing their job.
I got 6 children and 5 grandchildren. I ain't fear crime. I scared. You need to wake up and do something. I used to be looking behind my back every day. Similar as walking, I even was ready to run when you come approach me.
And while most people we spoke with expressed personal concerns related to crime, these security officers were unfazed. They say the plaza they guard is crime-free, and when they go home, they have peace of mind.
I have no fears of crime, because at the end of the day, I only go to work and home, so I don't really be out to experience no crime, But for me, I feel safe,
It isn't as before that you had the fear of coming out your car and, and whatnot, but I think it's a minimum now.
Still to come on Our News, the Prime Minister urges more businesses to take the solar route, plus the Fit Friday showdown you don't want to miss. Stay tuned.